Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Um, so before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of things. So if you are having any technology issues or have any questions in regards to that, please use the chat function. Um, we have a couple TNS members who are going to be moderating that and can answer any questions for you all during this time. That chat function can also be utilized if you have any specific questions about what we're talking about today. I'll have a couple of times throughout the presentation where I'll stop to answer some of those questions that you all have. Um, let's see what else. Also, you guys are all automatically muted and your video is off so that there's no distraction that way. So just wanted to kind of make that aware as well. So let's get started. Um, okay. All right. So thank you guys for showing up today as we talk about COVID-19 and how this is affecting transition services. We as an organization are really excited to kind of start off our webinar workshop series with this and to talk about transition in regards to how it's being affected right now and what are some of the things that we can do to potentially help to solve this problem. So let's, oh, there we go. Okay. So what I first want to go through is a little introduction about who we are as an organization. In case you don't know much about us, I want to give us a little bit of a background before talking about COVID-19 and how it's affecting these services. Go into whom COVID-19 is affecting, what are the issues related to transition, and why is this a problem, and some resources that we can utilize to help solve this problem or to think about solving this problem, and then recap it all at the beginning, and we'll have some time to answer any questions that you all have. Having some techno issues on my side. Okay, so who we are. So our mission is advocating for societal change for individuals with disabilities as they transition out of high school by providing resources and community support. And so the way that we do that is through education, advocacy, and inspiration. By educating society on the importance of including those with disabilities into their society through this transition process. Education can go a long way to help people understand the importance of including others into society and teaching these transition skills. But education and training can also be targeted to those families or loved ones with a disability or know of someone with a disability to help them through this transition process. Or the process that they're going to be going through later on in life. By bringing that education to the forefront and talking about it in conversations, education is not the only tool that we can have to make change, but through advocacy efforts as well as cultivating self-advocacy, we can hopefully bring more awareness to society that this transition process isn't easy, and there are not as many opportunities out there for individuals with disabilities as we want, and how we can hopefully make a change for that. And then lastly, one of our pillars is inspiration. And this can come off in a little bit of a negative connotation sometimes as being a savior, but we're seeing inspiration in a different way. We see inspiration at targeting society to think outside of the box, to start accepting and integrating individuals with disabilities into the community more by giving them opportunities at jobs that maybe they haven't been created yet or we haven't thought about creating yet. It's been shown in the research that individuals with disabilities get the same types of jobs when they do graduate high school. And so maybe jumping outside of the box. And that's something that we're going to talk about today a little bit, looking at more technology jobs that we can teach those skills for, and inspire businesses and educational systems to continue to think outside of the box for the opportunities and the skills that are needed. And so this is something that we're doing with TNS. To cultivate this education awareness and hopefully change. And we serve individuals with disabilities, parents, families, teachers, employers, various community members who have a relation to someone with a disability in that transition process. So that's a little bit about who we are. So let's get started. So why is this a problem? We want to talk about COVID-19 and how it's affecting transition services. Before doing that, I want to give a quick little background just on transition in general and maybe some of the barriers that we already have. So in 2019, 19.3% of persons with disabilities were employed, as stated by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Unemployment for both persons with and without disabilities declined from the previous year to about 7.3% and 3.5% respectively. Well, why is this a problem, or why are these numbers so low? This is possibly due to the reflection of the barriers that are put upon this population for successful unemployment. Barriers can be made up of either obtaining employment, so teaching the skills that you need for an interview process, applying to jobs, as well as maintaining employment. So understanding the disability laws that protect you as an employee, as well as social skills that you may need in a job too. Oh. So in retrospect, looking at obtaining a job, the skills that you may need to be able to obtain employment, in schools, we're teaching these different types of skills. We're preparing you to go to college, or we're preparing you to go to a vocational program. These after school programs can also touch upon these obtaining and these maintaining a job skill, such as interview skills, resume building, specific independent living skills. There's a lot of skills that are needed to be taught in regards to transition, not just to receive a job, but to be able to function independently outside of the school setting. And these can be taught in after school community-based transition programs, school to work transition-based programs. This environment should be touching upon a lot of these skills to maintain that progress and to maintain that independence. Another way that these skills are being taught is through, through the workplace, is that employers and coworkers should also be set up to provide support to these employees with disabilities, and get the training to be able to work with these individuals with disabilities, so that obtaining a job and maintaining a job isn't affected in these percentages that we looked at previously. So going back to schools, a study was done in 2004. It surveyed teachers, and 86% of the teachers stated that they didn't teach some of these transition skills because they either did not have the resources, or they didn't have the time or the knowledge to be able to teach a lot of these skills that are encompassed under this large word of transition. So brainstorming a little bit in how we can be creative and teach these skills in a different way to be included in an IEP is imperative. And then to also find outside resources to resource out to. Transition does not also have to start at the age of 14 because it's stated like that by law. It can also start a lot earlier by teaching students a lot of these independent living skills that they are going to need when they are 17 and 18 or 20 years old when they graduate. If we wait until someone's already 7 to 18 years old when we're teaching these skills, we're not setting them up for success to be independent on their own. And so obviously one of these problems is in schools is having the resources and the time and the knowledge. Within jobs, a study then was done in 2011, which surveyed employers on their attitudes of hiring people with disabilities. And so on here are a couple of the key words that came from that: a fear of the unknown. There was ignorance, a cost risk benefit, legal liability. A lot of these things popped up as the reason that they're nervous on hiring individuals with disabilities, or just unaware of hiring people with disabilities. About half of the respondents in this survey agreed that they don't hire employees with disabilities because they can either not perform the job essential functions, or they just have a lack of knowledge. This quote is coming directly from that paper, that a lack of knowledge or experience with people with disabilities, misconceptions as to what a person with a disability is capable of, lack of knowledge about discrimination laws or reasonable accommodation laws, a lot of employers misunderstand or do not know the laws. They need education. Employers should be trained on disabilities and how to accommodate and handle individuals with them. Sometimes employers need to help rethinking about how their job can be completed, how certain tasks can be completed, due to all of this. And so this lack of knowledge and this lack of awareness can also be affecting these numbers of percentages of individuals being employed and not being employed. Employers also see very few people with disabilities in their daily lives, and therefore if they're not interacting with them on a daily basis, there's this fear of the unknown. And so we need to also change this too. However, now that we know that these barriers existed before COVID-19, now this other huge barrier of COVID-19 has just plopped on our front doorstep. And so how is that also affecting all of these things that I just talked about in regards to transition? So now the employment rate is around 13%, and this is not dividing that number amongst those with and without disabilities. So those numbers have not been released yet, so just try to imagine where that divide probably is occurring. And so this is an alarming number. Another kind of graph to depict this is looking at the US weekly initial jobless claims. It's now above the 6,000, and it's higher than it's ever been, as you can see here. And so just looking at this as one barrier as it is, that these jobs are not being fulfilled because they're having to be shut down during this time. And so that's a huge barrier that we're having to look at. So with all of that, looking at the schools, after school programs, looking at these businesses, all those barriers beforehand that I talked about and all of the lack of knowledge that they had before, it's even multiplied because of COVID-19. So schools, they're not in session. And in some states, they're not in session for the remainder of the year. Those individuals that are about to graduate are losing a whole semester of a learning opportunity. Online teaching is also not the best way always to teach some of these independent skills or these transition skills. But we're having to kind of scramble last minute to get everything together. But also we have schools that they're not equipped to be able to set up with this technology, or families who maybe don't have the technology or the services to be able to get that online education. It's affecting IEP goals. I know personally with the clients that I serve, a lot of the teachers are having to amend their IEPs, and those goals are going to be the same when we come back into the fall. And so a lot of these skills are not being taught during this time, and their progress isn't being made. In regards to businesses, the attitudes of employers, as discussed previously, with this lack of education, this concern about performance issues, or even applicants with disabilities, this becomes more of an issue now in the fact that businesses are closed. And then in the face of this emergency and this crisis, if businesses are open and when they are hiring, what is that going to look like? Are they going to be hiring the individuals with the disabilities? Are they going to be thinking about that? Are they prepared to hire these individuals? So this is looking at the why that this is a problem, and we can see that it is a huge problem that's affecting transition, which goes into how are we going to start looking at this to solve this problem. Now that we've looked at the why, I want to start touching upon some of the questions that we can answer in regards to how we can begin to solve these problems, or how we can just look at these problems in general to potentially solve them or plan to solve them in the future. So the biggest thing right now is there's an abundance amount of time for some of us, not all of us. And so a lot of these strategies that I'm going to talk about can be utilized in this time, so we can plan, we can think about what's going to happen, and we can explore different options. I think the biggest thing too, as we go through this presentation, is that we as an organization don't have all of the answers, but what we want to share with you right now are some ways to potentially solve some of these questions that you have, or to inspire you to reach out to the right people that might have the answers to this. but also that these problems might not be solved. These huge percentages of unemployment is not going to be solved overnight. And we need to be able to acknowledge that. All of these why scenarios that I talked about before in regards to a lack of resources and a knowledge in regards to businesses or education, maybe we need to look at it a little bit differently, and how we can change that post-pandemic. Not necessarily change it now, and maybe we just need to get by with the time that we have, but then plan for when this is all over so that we can come into a future that's a little bit better because of what's happening right now, and we're prepared for that. So the first thing that I want to touch upon, and I was looking at everybody who registered for this talk today, and we do have a lot of educators and therapists that are joining us today, as well as a lot of family members or advocates. And so I want to spend a little bit more time on these slides, as this is a little bit more relevant to the audience that we have today. So what I was talking about previously is one of the research studies was why educators maybe aren't teaching a lot of these skills is because there is a lack of resources or a lack of potential knowledge. And so again, we can use this time to increase that knowledge. We're not necessarily going to be able to increase the lack of resources, but maybe we can think of ideas to solve that problem. But we can use this time right now to increase our knowledge. So the first one is simply just reading, finding articles such as the one that I just talked about in regards to attitudes of employers and teachers and educators on transition. Learn about some new strategies that are out there. Look into the research that is being produced even currently now in regards to COVID-19 to increase that knowledge in your practice as an educator or a therapist to continue to do the best practice that you possibly can. Consulting. I think the biggest thing right now is we cannot do this by ourselves. We need to reach out to other professionals within our field, outside of our field as a reference to help these families. If you're not able to provide a certain service to a family or to an individual with a disability, maybe you know someone who is able to do that, and be able to consult with them to be able to provide a support for them in this time of need in this crisis that we're in. Webinars are also a great tool. Some companies and organizations are putting on free online webinars during this time, such as this one that TNS is putting on. Join them. It's a great way to very low effort of just listening to information that might spark some new and creative ideas for you, or really just to kind of help you manage the stress that we're under in this time. Planning for the future. I know I keep bringing this up, but using these resources and this knowledge to plan for when this is all over, because it is going to be over at some point, and we need to be prepared for that. I know for myself as a therapist with my clients and my families, I was not prepared for a pandemic like this to occur and to move everything online. And I'm sure a lot of you, either being in college or being educators and working with families, that you weren't prepared for that either. And so we can't erase all of that and start over, but what we can do is prepare for when this is all over so that we're not picking up all of the pieces and we can kind of get back to some sort of normalcy, whatever that may be. Thinking outside of the box, this is one of the biggest things that I think is important that we as educators and therapists should be doing. That transition is changing, and I think it's changing because of this too. What does it look like? We have online schooling and technology. We should be pushing to be using these services and these tools more, even outside of a pandemic. Teaching our youth and our adults with disabilities to be able to utilize these systems and these platforms on their own. Because this is not the first or the last time that a crisis like this is going to be occurring to the world. So how can we plan for that? And we can set people up for success by being able to use a lot of these different technology systems. Within the job market too, there are many different types of jobs out there and different skills that can be taught that, as I know for myself as a therapist, I never really touched upon with some of my clients going through that transition process, such as computer science related fields, teaching someone to code. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but there are resources out there to teach these individuals to do that. And that's a whole new job market that can open up for somebody. And so maybe we use this time right now to be a little bit more creative in that approach and be creative in the way that of the skills that we need to teach a little bit later on. And then lastly, I think this is something that we really need to pay attention to, is worrying about mental health. This might not be at the forefront of everybody's mind, but it is a huge issue that's affecting these transition services on top of all the other barriers that I've talked about. If we're struggling as individuals without a disability, as being the educators and the therapists, to understand this lockdown, this stay-at-home order, trying to figure out life as it is, just imagine how some of our families and those individuals going through this process are trying to process this too. It's going to cause potentially a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. So maybe what we need to do is change our expectations during this time and realize that a huge change is not going to occur right now, because a huge change has already occurred. So we most likely need to put a Band-Aid on the solution right now to get by and to manage what's happening currently. And then when it's all over, because it will be over, how we can plan and how we can come back from that. It's okay if things aren't getting done. But we can change maybe the way that we approach or we look at transition to help adapt families, to help adapt our practice, whether it be something very small as teaching an individual to follow a schedule that can be related to a work environment once we come back to being able to get into a more social setting. Or if it's really just kind of managing our stress right now and our mental health, and I have some tools that we can talk about a little bit later at the end of the presentation as well. For our employers, so I know that we don't have any employers, if any, on this talk today, but I did want to briefly touch upon it because I think it's important and something that I know as myself as a therapist, I'm reaching out to small businesses to kind of talk a lot about these things, and something that we're doing as an organization as well. So education, increasing the knowledge of working with those with disabilities, increasing the knowledge of the laws and regulations that are governing the disability population, connecting with educators and therapists to better understand how to alter a job and to gain more employees with disabilities. Since a lot of these small business owners do have a lot of time on their hands because we have to close down, maybe we can use this time to educate them on what's important. And education and just talking about it is the first step for planning for a better future that we can change. Also, starting small. Just because we have the time doesn't mean that we have to take on all of these huge projects. Maybe it is just talking to a small business owner about hiring someone with a disability. Maybe it is for an employer just making a small diversity and inclusion PowerPoint for your employers, or planning for when you do come back, being able to hire some people with a disability. And again, planning for the future. When this is all over, they're going to need staff to be able to get work done. So it might not be the first thing on their mind to hire a person with a disability. So we need to be aware of that also as educators, as family members, as therapists, to maybe help to change their mentality with that. So that when this storm does die down, how we can help to support them. And then lastly, families. So taking this time as a family member to actually involve yourself in a lot of the strategies that I talked about with educators, with therapists, with employers, they can do the same things. But maybe also answering these three very important questions for yourself. And these questions can be in regards to transition in general, but they can also be in relation to COVID-19 and how that is affecting transition. So where are they now? Where is the individual with a disability right now within their transition process? But then also, where are they right now in regard to COVID-19, and how is that affecting them? Where do we want them to go? So if COVID-19 wasn't a thing and we weren't in this crisis and we were just back in school learning these transition type skills, where do we want them to go? And maybe we have to change our expectations a little bit due to what's happening in the world right now. And then how can we get there? And I think that's a great question too, is maybe we do need to start really small. Maybe it's not going to get there as fast as we thought it was going to. And with these questions, maybe it's just thinking about them. We don't necessarily have to answer them right now. Like I keep saying, I don't think this is a great time to solve all the world's problems, but we need to talk about them and bring this conversation to the forefront of our minds so that we can start creating some positive change from this. Maybe you just answer these questions and you just sit and ruminate with them. Maybe you bring them to other educators or family members so that you can talk about it more in depth. Maybe you bring it to the individual with a disability who is going through that transition process to see how they're seeing how everything is going. And then lastly, we want to look at the what. So we've talked about the problem, and we see why it is a problem before COVID-19 and now after COVID-19. And then we've looked at some ways on how we can best deal with this situation. So specifically looking at the specific things we can do now to answer some of these how questions. I do want to take a minute really quick in case there are any questions that are relevant right now that we can answer. And if not, I can leave more time at the end as well. But I'm going to try. Josh, I just unmuted you. I don't know if there are any questions right now that are relevant that I can answer. If not, that's totally fine too. I just wanted to take a quick small break.
It doesn't look like anyone has sent any in the chat right now.
Cool, perfect, awesome. As a quick reminder, if you do have any questions in relation to any of this, please send them in the chat and we can take some time at the end. I want to leave a couple of minutes to answer some of those things that you guys may have. Okay, so let's go back and talk about the what. So answering this question of how do they plan to get there? Well, we can talk with schools and therapists, and we can create these partnerships. Interdisciplinary approaches to education, to therapy, I would say is the most effective way to help within this transition process. And so maybe these different therapists and these teachers or educators or whoever it may be, even family members, can connect with one another to disseminate and to share a lot of this information. This is not a time right now to be holding on to like all the great tips and tools and strategies to help get through transition, to get through this time. Right now, we should be sharing this with the world and be supporting as many people as we can. And creating those partnerships is a great way to do it, especially since we have the time to do that. We can create more of those partnerships so that when we do come back to whatever normal is after this, that we are seeing things a little bit more positively and we can achieve a little bit more goals. Also seeing what is important right now. So looking at achievable goals. And I think this is something as an educator and a therapist myself, I've been trying to reflect on that. Again, huge changes might not be occurring in this time. So we need to change our expectations and look at what can be achieved during this time, whether it be a small schedule that we put into place, whether it be looking at mental health aspects to just make sure we manage this time, whether it be making sure that an individual is not regressing in what they've learned. Maybe they're not increasing a lot of skill sets, but they're staying neutral. And I think that's still a huge win. Coming from personal experience with the families that I work with, I'm doing a lot of family training for them within this transition process, and not necessarily working on specific skills to be taught for the individual, but I'm trying to help the families get through this time. And I think that's a huge achievable goal, because we are in a crisis currently and we need to switch our expectations of how we do things. Also, what's really important right now is talking about it. So having you all join this webinar and listening to me spew about transition and how it's being affected by COVID-19 is another huge win, because we might not be talking about it in these times because we're so frustrated with everything that's going on, but we need to talk about it so that we can create some change. And so I have some strategies a little bit at the end of the PowerPoint that I'll share with you that TNS is doing. Again, talking about time, there are people that have an abundance amount of time right now that can be utilizing a lot of these strategies a little bit more. On the flip side, there are people who don't have an abundance amount of time, whether it be you're a family member and you have multiple kids that you need to care for, and whether you are also working as because you are an essential worker or whatever it may be. So again, going back to those creating partnerships, maybe there are professionals and there are other family members or there are other people that you can connect with who do have the time who can help support you within this process. For videoing, so we are in a world of technology. We are in a world of social media, and that was happening before COVID-19, but now it's just taken off even more because we don't have anything else to do but sit around and utilize a lot of these technology systems that we have. So using it for educational purposes, such as joining webinars like you all are doing, watching a YouTube video about a specific skill, trying to increase that knowledge as much as you can, but then also in a social aspect. So using a lot of these platforms to still connect with people. Something that I've talked to a lot of family members and I've been reading out there is that family members are concerned because the fact that schools are shut down right now, that social piece for their kids within that transition process is no longer there because they don't have anywhere to go and we have to socially distance. But there are things such as Zoom or FaceTime or Google Hangouts or whatever it may be that can increase that social connection still. I know personally, I feel like I'm being more social with the connections that I have in my life by setting up Zoom meetings at night and on the weekends. And that's something that can be easily set up for these individuals within this transition process too. And then lastly, looking at skills. Again, maybe this is a time not to teach all of these skills, but look at different skills that could be taught. So again, the question is, how do they plan to get there? Maybe some of the jobs that they were thinking about before COVID-19 happened, maybe we need to tweak that a little bit. And we need to think of different jobs and different skill sets that we could teach instead, such as using a computer, setting up a website, filming a YouTube video, whatever it may be, since this kind of seems like where our world is going, and that's fine, but we need to be able to capitalize on those aspects. And that's a huge job market and a huge amount of skills that need to be taught. So I want to specifically look at targeted either interventions or targeted tools that are out there for you all to use. So before I go into this, all of these links, these tips and tricks that we have, we'll be sending out in an email to all of you. This PowerPoint will also be sent out in an email to you, and it is being recorded so that you can watch it again or send it to whoever you may want to send it to. We're also going to post it on our website too. So if you don't worry, you will all get all of this information. So telehealth, this is something that is booming right now. And it was booming a little bit before COVID-19 happened too, but I think there's a bigger emphasis on it now because of everything that's happening. And we have more of this remote work that we have to do. So in a short little description, if you don't know what telehealth is, it's utilizing video conferencing technology such as Zoom to provide certain therapies and education within the medical field, within psychology, within you name it, and to still provide those services, but via a face-to-face platform that's over technology. So let me click on here. I just want to make sure that you're able to see my screen. Oh, Josh, are we able to see this? I just want to make sure before I continue on.
Yeah, it's a little blurry, but I think if you explain it, people can see it.
Okay. And again, these will be sent out to you after the presentation today. So if it is a little blurry, I apologize for that. I think my internet connection on my side is a little lagging. but you guys will get this after too, so I'll just explain this. So this link here goes over different telehealth guidelines and resources by different disciplines. So it goes over the national resources, so what telehealth is within human service and within education, and the laws that are protected underneath it. And then in different categories, such as psychology, speech and language pathology, applied behavior analysis, early intervention, occupational therapy, as well as other free online trainings, and then talking more about some evidence-based tools too. And so this is really important, either being a family member to look at some of these free tools that are out there to educate yourself, and maybe you go to an occupational therapist that your kid was receiving, or if you're a teacher, trying to figure out some other ways to still implement your curriculum in a different way. But then there's also tools on here for free and low cost, like internet for service providers, as well as like cellular service. Because I think that's one of the main things within this telehealth realm, is that we can get this set up and we can start teaching things remotely. Excuse me. But we have to be honest that a lot of our families that we're working with, or some of our families that we're working with, might not have access to internet systems, or might not have access to cellular data to be able to set up these face-to-face conferences. The nice thing that we're trying to all come together during this time is that there are businesses that are giving free internet to families during this time, whether it be Comcast or AT&T. Also, cell phone companies are expanding their coverage and their Wi-Fi hotspots to certain areas. They're also waiving late fees and extending services to a certain date. And so this is a great tool for an educator or a therapist to be able to give to a family member if they're in a struggling time, or for families to be able to look at too. So talking about training a little bit, I just want to touch upon a couple of resources that I have. So the first one, it's called AFFIRM, so Autism Focused Intervention Resources and Modules. So yes, this company is designated to individuals with autism, and that is their focus. However, these tools and these modules that you would be able to sign up and learn about can be applied to really any disability. It's just that was the focus of the creators of this organization. But this is a free tool, and there are many other free tools out there like this. You can sign up and watch all of these webinars that are on there. If you're an educator or a therapist, they have continuing education credits that you can get for free during this time. But more importantly, for a family member too, to maybe help support you and your family during this time within transition, it gives you a lot of great tools during this time to look at. So specifically, I wanted to look at the COVID-19 toolkit that they have. I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure that you guys can see this. But again, this is specific to individuals with autism, but a lot of these strategies, as I go through it, can be implemented with an individual with or without a disability, to be honest. And so they go through 7 strategies to support individuals during uncertain times. So the understanding piece, opportunities for expression. I think if we need to express how we're feeling during this time, so do they. Maybe prioritizing, like I was saying before, some of these mental health aspects such as coping and calming strategies, rather than teaching different skills, might be the best route that we have to go upon. Maintaining routines, so maybe that's one of those achievable goals. Setting up a schedule that can be followed, I think, is a huge win in this situation, and something that can be related to transition outside of this world, whether it be following a routine at work or following a schedule when you clock in. Building new routines into that schedule too, if you're able to do that. Fostering these connections. Again, that social piece is lacking right now. It's no longer here. So how can we still increase that social connection and that social piece? And being aware that this is going to change a lot of behaviors for a lot of individuals, especially with individuals with disabilities. It might cause more stress and more anxiety because they might not understand fully what is currently happening right now. So maybe we need to take the time to try to explain that, and be aware that things aren't going to be perfect right now. Behaviors might escalate. skills might not be able to be taught, and we need to be okay with that and try to manage and get through it. So again, this is another resource that's not just the COVID-19 toolkit that they have on here, but the different modules that they have as well, that is very helpful for individuals with and without autism and other disabilities alike, that can be utilized with educators, therapists, as well as family members. This is a snapshot from a link that I will send you all out after this webinar. But this is in relation to parent and family training, because I think that's something that's really going to skyrocket from this as well. Is yes, we're going to be working with these individuals with disabilities during this transition process, but maybe some of our individuals that we're working with still need a lot of skills to be able to support themselves independently, so we have to work with family members still. So there's a lot of free opportunities as well as non-free opportunities, but curriculums that are already made to deal with a lot of parent training on dealing with some things that we're going through right now. And here are just a brief kind of bullet point list of some of them. Again, I'll send the link out to you all after this. But this is a great tool for educators and therapists. We don't need to reinvent the wheel to solve a lot of these questions that we were just asking, to solve these problems. Maybe we utilize something that's already been made to be able to adapt into our practice. Or for a family member who has the time and wants to increase their education and their awareness, they can have these tools too. So this is the logo for Google Classroom. Just wanted to kind of give it a little bit of a pitch for it, but this is another tool that's out there, and it's not just Google Classroom. There are other systems as well that educators might be aware of that can be utilized during this time for online teaching. I know for one, I'm not a teacher, but I'm using Google Classroom for some of my families, but then also just personally too, because you can set it up very nicely to have homework assignments, to have just resources on there, to be able to just send to families or even employers for that matter, to give them something to do during this time. And so maybe this is a great opportunity to learn how to use some of these systems, whether it be for a family who's trying to set up a schedule for their kids during this time, or even teaching the individual with a disability going through this transition process how to utilize Google Classroom and set one up for themselves. There's two links that are associated with this. The one is a YouTube link that goes over how to set up a Google Classroom. And then the second one, it's not gonna be able to pull up. But the second link on here is really cool. It's Google has put out different tools and tips and tricks for online teaching and education during this time. And it's very helpful, and I think something that you guys would all benefit from. And then lastly, connection. As I keep saying, we don't have that connection piece, but we can still have it. Let's utilize the social media platforms that we have, such as Zoom. So this is just one of the platforms, but we're currently using it now. But how can these school-aged kids or these transition-aged adults who all work together in some sort of capacity, how can they still connect during this time? Via a Zoom platform. It's important to capitalize on these opportunities still, and to not let that go to the layaway, because we are going to come back into reality, into normalcy, whatever that means, and we still need to have some of these social interactions, whether it be an educator or a therapist too, that utilizes a system like this to just work on social interactions so that we can maintain that skill as well. So some resources that I just want to briefly touch upon. ACT is the first one, and this is the Association for Contextual and Behavioral Science. So ACT is an acronym for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. It's a combination of behavioral and cognitive behavioral therapy within psychology. And a lot of it deals with this mental health aspect of being more self-aware and in the present moment. And this website is really great tool for educators, therapists, for employers, and family members to kind of deal with the time that we're going through right now. And maybe this is that small win that they can achieve, is being able to work through some of these activities that are on this website with your kids or with yourself as as an educator to be able to understand kind of what we're going through. And so this website has a lot of free resources on it and free trainings, videos to watch, as well as if you are in the field and need continuing education credits, this is a great tool as well for you. Another great tool is to reach out to your local universities. So I'm in Michigan and I graduated from Michigan State. So one of the things that Michigan State is doing right now is they're doing a research study on how COVID-19 is affecting persons with and without disabilities. And filling out something like this is going to help prepare ourselves as well as future educators within these fields to better support our students going forward. Other support systems that universities are putting into place. Michigan State, for example, within the state of Michigan, has put in what's called the Spartan Caregiver Support. So this is to help specifically behavioral problems, not specific within transition, but I thought it was important to touch upon because there could be universities near you that are working really diligently right now to put supports out for individuals within that transition age population. And so contacting them, making those connections and asking them what they're doing right now to help best support you. And a lot of these are free as well. Contacting local small businesses is another great one, as we've talked about already, to introduce them to the idea of, hey, maybe you can hire this person with a disability later, or just connecting with them to learn about the different skills that could be taught. And then I want to end on some of the things that TNS is doing to help out during this time. So the first one is our resource guide that we continually to grow week by week, but it's a set and a list of resources for transition, whether it be independent living, working on money skills, financial aspects, you name it, that we can connect you with, that if you're struggling and you need some help to find a specific therapy or a counseling session or some sort of supports system, that we can help you connect those with the right people. Or if you know of a resource that we can disseminate to other families, please let us know so that we can put it on here. We're also putting on educational workshops. So this is one of the first of our workshop series that we want to keep developing. Obviously, we're having to do these via a web-based platform, but we're excited to continue this process. And we have a lot of workshops that are in the works right now that are related to COVID-19, just because that's the big hot topic. That now that you all are here on this workshop, you're going to get email blasts about so that you can participate. But whether it be a webinar, more lecture-based like this one, or whether it be more workshop, more collaborative, where we can talk and discuss things back and forth. With educators, with employers, we have workshops that we're creating, but then also with the individual with the disability. We also have a service on our website that during this time, it's leaving a lot of, like we've been talking about, a lot of people around the country without these vocational transition support systems. And so filling this out, this is on our website, about the brief types of services or supports that you're seeking, whether it be as an educator or a family member or whoever, in relation to transition, that so we can pair you up with someone on our on our TNS team to help you through that process, whether it be job coaching, money management, certain skill that you want to teach right now, or whether it be even to kind of vent about what's happening and maybe we can help you through that. Our STEPS program, we had a STEPS program earlier this week where we invited people from all different backgrounds, whether it be college students or teachers, other educators. We've done it with people within the business, other business sectors before, and just talking about transition. The step that we had on Monday was more specific to transition in COVID-19, but it was a great way just to talk. Change is not going to happen unless we bring these conversations to the forefront, and that's what we need to continue to keep doing. And so we will invite you as well to the STEPS program, or even if you want to put on a step for yourself, please contact us, because this is a great way to talk and to connect different people from different worlds, because we all don't have the right answer, but we all can help each other get to the right answer. Lastly, something we're doing is we are pairing up with Lehigh University to create some more of these social interactions between people with and without disabilities within this transition age population via Zoom platforms. And so we're really excited about this opportunity, and we will send you more information about this as well. But lastly, kind of bringing everything full circle, these workshops that we're doing, these readings that you guys should be involved in, increasing your knowledge is going to help with that education piece. Even in this time right now, to advocate for transition services, because it's probably not on the forefront of a lot of people's minds within the business world or within whatever system. And so pushing the agenda, but then also inspiring all of us to think outside of the box about different skills that we can teach because of COVID-19 and how we can turn this negative system into a positive when this is all done. So that is everything that we have for you guys today. I hope that it was super beneficial and helpful. Even if you knew a lot of this information, maybe you still are able to come away with a little bit more peace of mind or inspiration about something that you can do moving forward, or rather it be of like, hey, I want to connect with TNS to kind of help disseminate this information and provide that support to people. So thank you guys so much for being involved with this. I do want to take a couple minutes now, if there are any questions, to answer them. So Josh, I don't know if there are any specific questions, or if you haven't had an opportunity to use the chat room at all to ask any of your questions, now is a great time to do that if you do have any.
There are none in the chat room at this time, Ricky.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll stay on for maybe a couple minutes. If anybody does have any, feel free to ask. Again, if you don't, no harm, no foul. This is my contact information below. We will also be sending out a follow-up feedback form into all of your emails after this, so that you can give us feedback, since this is the first workshop that we've been putting on, about what we can do better next time. But then also we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you what you want to learn. Or are you an expert on a specific topic that we can partner with you to disseminate that information to other families and other educators within this field? Because that'll be super important. And then you also will be on our email list, so you can hear about the other workshops and opportunities.
Ricky, there is a question in the chat. Is the Spartan Caregivers Support Group for folks outside of Michigan?
Great question. So as of right now, they are only able to serve individuals within the state of Michigan. But it is a great question to potentially ask local universities. I've been seeing some other universities around the country pop up with these same support systems like the Spartan Caregiver Support. And that's what TNS is kind of doing as well, is that we're putting our own sort of support system into place. And so even asking us some of the questions that you might have, with that service system that we currently have on the website, if we don't have the specific expertise to be able to help you with one of our members on our TNS staff, we will connect you with someone who does. That's a good question, though. Are there any other? I'll give it a minute or two. We really appreciate you all coming to this. We hope that you did learn something beneficial from it. We were excited to share this information with you all. We know it wasn't a huge solving of the problem conversation, but we did that on purpose because this might not be the best time to solve a problem, but it is a good time to think about how we can and continue to make those connections. And we also wanted to share with everybody what we're doing in this time to help support as many people as we can. But if we don't have any more questions, we'll stick around. I'll stick around on here in case anybody does, and I can talk about it. But thank you guys for joining. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ricky. Really appreciate it.
I'll stick around for another 5 minutes just in case anybody does have any.
Great job, Ricky. I'm gonna log off. Give me a call if you need anything.
Will do.